Hello world, welcome to Comic Book News. I'm your old pal Dan Shaheen. Today we've got, the return of Steve Jeppi. We're going to be talking with Steve about everything. We're going to talk about the recent changes in the industry. We're going to talk about his history in comics. We're going to talk about the comics he loves. We're going to talk about, I've got an acronym salad. We're going to talk about LOCs, CGAs, NFTs, and BTCs. So stay tuned. It's going to be great. But before you do, hey, if you haven't already, consider clicking subscribe. If you want to get more interviews like this with industry luminaries and up-and-comers, or you want to check out new comics in the $1 Million Mailbox, please, please, please consider hitting that subscribe button. If you have comics you want to see live on this show, there's one place you can send them. The $1 Million Mailbox, P.O. Box 1163, Arcata, California, 95518. It's beautiful here in Arcata, California, let me tell you. But this is not where we're going to go to talk to Steve. We're going to go, where are we going to go? You know where we're going to go, I hope, by now.
The Bat Pulse.
Okay, we're going to bring in Steve in just a minute, but before we do, I want to talk about, I just booked my guest for next week. He just confirmed for this very time. Next Thursday, not this time, I'm sorry, our regular time. Next Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific time, we're going to talk to Bill Morrison. Yeah, from Bongo Comics and Mad Magazine. This guy is super talented and a really cool dude as well. Look forward to talking to him. Coming up also, I was going to do a $1 Million Mailbox next week. Maybe I'll do another one, but it'll probably be the following week. But please send your comics in. We're going to talk real soon with Steve Jeppi, I promise. We've got people out there in the comments already. We got our pal Mr. Dongs, and we got Nerdette watching strong. Guys, keep the comments coming. It's fine. We'll do a dedicated Q&A section at the end, but keep them coming. Keep the chatter up. We'll be talking to Steve about that really soon. One thing we're going to talk about for sure, man, is we're going to talk about changes to the industry. And everybody, myself included, kind of thought that, the pandemic was going to be the end of the comic book industry. I thought, there's been enough challenges already without this. But my new philosophy, hey, the comics industry is stronger than ever, and you got to change my mind. So that's what my challenge out there to you. I'm going to have a show soon all about the strengths of the comics industry. I'm not just talking about the financial strength. I'm talking about the increase in readership, the increase in collectability and attention from the outside, the increase in awareness and mindset in popular culture. All these things are things that I know that today's guest thinks about. But I also know that he thought about this stuff a lot longer ago than most of us did. He's somebody who went all in on comics a long time ago. And if you've watched our previous streams, you know Steve Jeppi went from owning a comic book store to bestriding the industry like a colossus as the king of comics for a 20-year period, as Diamond Comics Distribution was a legal monopoly on the distribution of comics in North America. All of that changed in the last year. Holy cow, DC Comics decided in the middle of the pandemic to take a hike, and not soon after, Marvel Comics also decided they were going to break the exclusive agreement with Diamond. How could Diamond possibly recover from this? This must have been a devastating blow to Steve Jeppi and his entire organization, right? Let's find out. We're going to talk to Steve right now. Let's bring him on right now. You've waited long enough. Let's bring him on in. Steve Jeppi, hey, welcome to Comic Book News. Welcome back.
Thanks, Dan. It's a pleasure to be back. I had a great time the last time or two, and looking forward to today as well.
Awesome, great. Well, let's get right into it, Steve. Let's start with what we had, what we build on the thumbnail. Let's talk a little bit about Geppi Gems. Can you tell me what Geppi Gems is?
Sure. Little background. If you recall, back in 1995, I opened Diamond International Galleries, which was a beautiful, ornate gallery in an office building where Diamond was also housed, but it wasn't really for the public. And that went from 1995 to 2006, where we transitionalized into a more formidable version of it called Geppi's Entertainment Museum, which was 12
Yes.
years at Camden Yards, right where the Baltimore Orioles play. And 3 years ago, because I am friends with the Librarian of Congress, a dear friend of mine, Carla Hayden, uh, ended up donating a large portion of my collection that was housed there to the Library of Congress. And currently, it's been a few months now, they have an exhibit open called Jeppi's Gems that is a precursor to what ultimately will be a dedicated room with my name on it in perpetuity, which is unusual because the only people that have ever had that is a dead president. So I don't know if I want to be associated with a dead president, but certainly it's a badge of honor in some ways. But nonetheless, while we're waiting for them to finish raising the money, that's going to be a much bigger project. Quite frankly, it's not even just Jeppi's room; it's larger than that, and they're in the process. But in the interim, they have created a beautiful exhibit called Jeppi's Gems that will actually be changing from time to time in the interim. Starting March, there'll be a new exhibit. Believe it or not, I have not seen the exhibit yet myself, but online, only because currently the government has a lot of changes in the visiting. Because of COVID, you have to get a ticket that is timed at a certain time you can go.
Uh
So
huh.
I do plan to go soon privately, but I'm ultimately waiting for a green light so that we can have a more of a grand opening postpartum, so to speak. And then that'll probably occur on a regular basis as they do new exhibits. But then ultimately, we will get the Jeppi's room, if you will, that'll be in prominent location right next to the gift shop, and it will be there in perpetuity. So for me, it's a great legacy for me personally and my family. But quite frankly, I'm even more proud of what it does for the industry, because now people who are, as we know and revere, the comic artists and writers that do this wonderful work, they will be in a setting conducive to what they deserve. They'll be right next to the Mona Lisas of the world and the Gutenberg Bibles and whatever else the world has already accepted. I
Yeah.
guess that's a good segue of what's going on right now, because our head is out of the water now after many, many years of being the redheaded stepchild of the pop culture world, so to speak. We're now dominant. Movies are dominated by comics. The collectible world is on fire with NFTs and you name it. So we got a lot to talk about, brother.
For sure, man. Well, let's talk about culture for a minute because we're talking library of Congress. Oops. And we're talking about the importance of comics to pop culture. And I'm going to say it's obvious to anybody who's paying attention that superhero comics in particular are like the driving cultural force in cinema at the moment. But I mean, if we go all the way back to the 60s and 70s, I mean, there is no Darth Vader without Doctor Doom, right? The comics were always a humongous influence on these things. But did you ever think? Did you ever think that that superheroes in particular would dominate film the way that they dominated the comics medium? I find it
Well,
fascinating.
I don't know that any of us ever, even the most optimistic, nobody's more Pollyanna about comics than me and what their potential is and was and will is yet. But I don't think it would have been easy for anybody to really believe that this was going to happen like it did. I mean, much to Martin Scorsese's chagrin, a comic movie got nominated for an Academy Award.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting perspective. I give it a couple of analogies here. Like I remember back in the, I guess it was in the 90s, when my dear friend Nancy Grasmick, who was the state superintendent of schools for 20 years, the longest tenured one, and still a dear friend of mine now, she did my first breakthrough because we were trying to get out of the 1950s mentality of the juvenile delinquency. And although we'd made progress, the schools were always a barrier. And I never forget the day she came to my office with 16 of her lieutenants. And before we went into the conference room, I took Nancy aside. I said, Nancy, pay attention. When you say it's okay and you kind of validate the comics are okay, watch them come out of the woodwork. because I had long held the theory and the actual belief based on my experience that if I had to pick one occupation that dominated comic book collectors, it was school teachers. And lo and behold, we got in that room and she basically did a little intro about how she loved comics and how it was a great tool for teaching and kids have to first be interested and it gets their attention. They came out of the woodwork. Well, I used to think about using them in the classroom. So now we got through that. And then movies became, well, they weren't done as well as they could in the 70s, even though we had a couple good ones, because movie people would try to movieize them. And it wasn't until they started letting comic book writers do the work that they actually started to be what they were. And we all know that history and how it finally became the Marvel Comics universe, not to mention DC's successes too. But MCU, that whole 20 movie string that was miraculously orchestrated, has put comics on the map to stay. And there's like no challenge to them. In fact, the movie industry might not be around anymore if it weren't for comic movies, being dominant.
Well, Steve, crazy enough, this was a sort of doomsday prediction that I made back in 1999 when I knew about the Spider-Man movie coming out, and I saw X-Men and Spider-Man. That's when I bought my comic book store, and I made a prediction. I didn't think it would last this long, to be honest, but I really thought that there was something about the superhero mythos, the way it's a modern exploration of old heroic myths and things that just resonates with people, and the simplistic action and colors and everything else really just sells it psychologically in a way that I really thought that it could happen to cinema. But it even took over to a degree I never imagined. I never imagined we'd see 10 years plus.
Well, as a medium,
dominance.
Comics are as good as anything you'll get, and I have a real strong belief in why that is. I always loved that Kevin Eastman called his museum Words and Pictures, because it is really what they are. They're very analogous to movies. But the beauty of a comic book is that when Dan Shaheen or Steve Jeppi or John Doe is reading that same issue, the transformation from the left panel to the right panel to the left panel to the right panel, where all the action is really happening, is in the most incredible tool ever invented, called your brain, your imagination. Because you're hearing the voice one way, you're seeing the action flow from one panel to the other in a different way than me. And no movie, no matter how great the special effects ever get, could ever think about some of your dreams, some of the crazy dreams you have. No one could ever capture that. And yet that's what comics do. You're literally taking a panel and saying to your brain, transmit this to the next panel and do the progression. So when they do the movies now, they are much better equipped with special effects to try to capture that. They'll never be able to fully get that, but at least it's a noble attempt and people are entertained by it. And I think it's a great way to promote comics as reading material, because once you go see a movie, now you kind of do it in reverse. You say, now picture in your mind's eye if you were watching that movie and you were able to be the director, if you will, and change something, and you could have a field day with that. So it's not surprising to me that movies are, all they needed to do was let our brilliant writers get a hold of the script, and that's when this started to happen.
I think you nailed it about what Scott McCloud called closure, that invisible thing that happens between the panels, right? That is it's what makes it.
Right? Will Eisner, there's just so many ways that you can capture this, and technology has given us the ability now to appreciate, I will say, why that's so special. We could never even believe that something like that. When I thought of them doing Spider-Man in a movie, I'm thinking, how are they going to do that? How's he going to swing from building to building? Or how's Superman going to really look like he's flying? Or some of the crazy explosions we see. And yet, when you go and watch one of these, even the non-believers, so to speak, that are just moviegoers, are like, holy cow, this draws you in. This is really good.
Totally agreed. And it's the difference sort of between a hot and a cool medium. Like comics, as Marshall McLuhan talked about, like comics engage you with active reader participation in a way that like the cinema screen does not.
By yourself. You don't even need an audience.
It's fantastic. So let's get out of comics theory. We're getting a little too existential here. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of a couple of things here. You guys, Steve, after we're going to talk about the distribution shakeup in a minute, but let's talk about one of your new acquisitions, CGA. What's CGA?
Well, Collectible Grading Authority is the mother name of the really more known names are AFA and VGA. AFA stands for Action Figure Authority, and VGA stands for Video Game Authority.
Ah.
These are the equivalents of CGC, which does comics. So historically, whether, of course, obviously for comics, but for everything now, when I would sell you a comic book and you're over in California and I say it's near mint and then you get it in the mail and you say, damn, Jeppi, this is a VF. It's not the third party attestation, the, opinion, if you will. It's still not 100%, you still can argue, but at least gave people the knowledge or the belief or the comfort. And that's where all this money's coming in, to know when they buy it, they could also sell it at that grade and not get too much resistance.
Yes.
So we needed that. And then action figures, that's what AFA has been the dominant number one, no contest authority. I always try to buy the best, and I figured was the best. And VGA, Video Game Authority, similarly. So those two companies, while not having been publicized greatly, it's the interesting thing about the grading business that everybody knows now. It's a kind of a great business to be in, but it's also got a big problem in today's environment called work, labor. We can't keep up. It's so much coming in that it's hard to train new people while you're trying to do the work at the same time. And for example, PSA that does the baseball cards, somebody paid $700 million for that, and they had to shut down taking on the business until they catch up. So while it's a great problem to have more business than you need, it's also still a problem, and that's the dichotomy of this whole thing. But I'm really thrilled to be in a position to leverage, if you will, the greater picture of what I keep telling people is who I am. It's called GFE, Jeppi Family Enterprises. Yes. Most people think of me, they tend to think of Diamond Comic Distributors, which is obviously, the biggest part of my business. But I tried to buy companies along the way that were all complementary to the industry so that the collector, which I am wholeheartedly one myself, has a way to get into our world and have every tool they need on every subject and every level and feel it's authoritative. And that's what the Overstreet Price Guide did for me, because that's probably one of I would say the strongest brand there is. I mean, I've had 51 years of dominance where when someone says the guide, no one ever says which guide.
Yeah, not even close.
Overstreet.
Yeah, not even close.
To Bob, not me. I just was fortunate enough to be able to bring him into the fold. Now these 27 years of the 51, I've actually owned it longer than Bob.
So let's talk about the GFE companies just for real quickly. So now we've got CGA.
I can almost remember.
We got DCD.
Diamond Comics. You got Diamond Book Distributors. This is the UK version of that. You got Alliance Games, which they're what Diamond is to comics. They are to games. Alliance. Yeah. You got Diamond Select Toys, my toy company. You've got Diamond International Galleries, which is the collectible side. We've got
Is that like original art?
The Price Guide. Pardon?
Is that like original art, the Diamond Galleries?
Comics and art. Yeah, it's kind of a sub-brand, if you will. They do their own auctions every week. You've got Diamond Select Toys. You've got Gemstone. You've got Hakes Americana as my auction arm. I almost have to take my business card out. I forget. There's so many of them now. But I think it's 12 in all, maybe. I don't know. And there's a lot of sub-brands. Within the brand of Gemstone, you have the Overstreet brand. You have, like I say, Diamond Select Toys. You have the Mini Mates. Art Asylum is actually a name you probably never heard of, but it's the company I bought that actually made the molds.
I know Art Asylum, sure.
You can look at CGA now, have the sub-brands of AFA, and they have VGA, and there's actually a couple lesser ones. So the only thing that in my portfolio that isn't really connected to the comic industry is Baltimore Magazine. But even in some ways, Are
you still involved with the Orioles?
I sold my interest in the Orioles, but I'm still the number one fan. I sit at every game, front row seats forever. Right. And even though they suck, I love them, and I'm always going to be there. But I'll notice today I got a little better badge of honor on. My Ravens are 8-3.
Nice.
How they're 8-3 is beyond me right now because they have had some really lucky games, but they're good too. So they haven't played their best, but yet they're 8-3. So God help us.
Better to be lucky than good.
They had the worst luck
when
when it comes to injuries. They had their whole backfield go down literally for the season. Anyway, no sports talk.
Okay, wait a minute. No, let's get back to.
CGA is my venture into the grading world, and I think the Overstreet brand will eventually play a part in that because I'm the mindset that if you a collector, you'd love to have it all in one place where you don't have to fight over, do you have the right grader? Do you have the right
Yes.
uh, pricing? Particularly the people coming into the market that have an
Yes.
interest, that have money, but always a little skeptical because, is this for real? I talked to one guy and he said, no, you don't use this one, you use that one.
Yes.
And it's not to be a monopoly kind of a thing, but you want to have certain consistency. So
I
hopefully I can
think
bring
the
it. But right now
Overstreet
it's all
brand
about
is a
action figures and video games. I have no real
yeah.
interest in, not say interest, but I have no plans whatsoever about comics for grading. That's
Yeah,
already been
the
taken care of.
Overstreet brand name is about as strong as it gets when it comes to
I
collectability of
think so. I
comics.
wouldn't have bought it
I
27 years ago.
I think adding that to a grading, like adding that Overstreet branding to a
I
CGA
think it would be a
graded
pretty
book,
powerful name in grading.
tremendous, tremendous, no doubt about it. Oh, here's a great question from a Facebook users. Overstreet, are we ever going to get an app? You know, there's an app
It's in
out there that.
process. I know I've been saying that for years, but I finally found the person who is currently not an employee, but a contractor who is the quintessential guy from my perspective that is doing this now. I'm waiting for a new update next week, and there will be
Great.
an app. There will be a searchability. It will be the quintessential version of what a lot of people are trying to do on some or smaller level,
Is
and
that
it'll
going to
have
be
the brand.
a paid app, a free app,
Well,
freemium?
there'll be a free element, and then there'll be a subscription element. And a lot of the marketing side is we don't want to put the cart before the horse. We got to first have the product. But once we have the product finished, and I'm a big believer you never get a second chance to make a good first impression. So, and that's probably why it's taken so long. And while I hate that it's taken so long, there's been some benefit to that because things have changed in the world to where you might have came out of
Oh
the
boy.
gate and went in a direction that maybe would have been hard to shift from. So now I feel like we're on the right page. We got a lot of flexibility in it, and people are going to have an app that they're going to love. Dealers
Awesome.
and collectors, they're going to love it.
Fantastic. It would be really great. I don't know if this is part of the plan, but for dealers to be able to contribute information
Well, it'd
like
be a lot of user-generated info because we're hoping to have
yeah.
real-time pricing. There'll have to be
Yeah.
verification. You just can't have three guys call up and say, I sold a Superman one for $2 trillion. There'll
Yeah.
be verification, but we will be dependent, quite frankly, on user input. And there'll be a way to track your own collection and be able to search. It's got so many bells and whistles that's why it's taken so long because of my
Okay.
stubbornness of wanting it to be all as much as it can be. Nothing will ever be perfect day one, but as much as it can be coming out of the gate, I want it to be what I want to use.
Right.
So stay
Bingo.
tuned
Okay,
for
well
that.
while we're on tech, Steve, let's go briefly the diamond ransomware situation.
Hope that I
So
can only say to you, I wish that it never happens to anyone ever. It's a big problem. You sent me a link the other day, a 3-hour congressional hearing about cyber of ransomware, and we got hit with, I believe, it was on November 5th, and I'm happy to say that's pretty much being resolved. Can't say too much about it, but it is a big disruption in your company because when your files are encrypted, you're so dependent on a lot of things that you have to have some fallback, and it just shows the blessing and the malediction of technology. You get
yeah.
so dependent on it that people forget how to do, or not even forget, they just can't do things the way they used to manually. It's a certain element of that. And in this case, technology has gotten so sophisticated that it's kind of like social media. The good news is you can spread the best news immediately, but it also means the bad guys can spread the worst news immediately or
Bingo.
the false news immediately.
Bingo.
And
Double-edged sword for
we're a
sure.
double-edged sword, but we like to think the good outweighs the bad. So we just have to be more protective. And I don't mean we Diamond. I mean everybody. The FBI got hit with ransomware. What can I tell you if I got hit with it? I'm a low
Yeah.
on the totem pole. I'm probably a small potato. But at the same token, it was very disruptive. It still continues to be on some level because even once you get back in, there's damage done, and you have to fix it. So
Okay, well, just
take a commercial break here to say my IT guys are unbelievable. They have worked 24/7 enthusiastically. This is like something you don't want to ever have to happen, and they are just brilliant. And I want the world to know that.
fantastic. Great. That's fantastic. That's good to hear. You don't hear enough of that. A little love for the IT
Well, I
guys out
recently
there.
gave a little speech that was broadcast at the outset of the summit that was online to welcome. I gave the welcome video, and I stressed in there the most valuable asset I have and you have and anybody in business has is your employees. Without them,
Oh.
They don't show up on a balance sheet. You don't see a line that says employees per se. I mean, you see payroll, but you don't see how you
Yeah.
put a value on them, how you establish their worth, because it's intangible. But I can tell you this: without them, you got big problems.
Yeah, some people view that purely as a cost center, right? And not as the core
Yeah,
of
it's
their
an asset.
organization.
It's not a liability.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
if you got people, productive people, and paying them fairly so that they want to be on your team, you can't get better than that. And
Okay,
we've been
one,
through a lot of
one
good
last
things.
IT question for you,
Sure.
though. I had a couple of retailers ask me, they said, hey, they still can't download some of their data files, their weekly invoice data files, the way they used to be able to.
All that's
And
being repaired. Whatever was happening before will be happening. I'm told it's like a 2-week window of where we feel we'll get,
okay,
pretty much back, because you got to, in addition to fixing, you're going to make sure you're protecting, and you're also trying to discover what you didn't know was broke. And it's a
yes,
good time to kind of, like, it's like when your oil light goes off in your car and you take it in to get oil and you discover, well, because it's in there something else, your brake pads are bad. So it's an opportunity. You try to take the lemon and make lemonade. So while we're in there fixing the bad stuff, we're going to figure out some other stuff. So I
okay.
look at everything as, everything happens for a reason. We don't like when things happen, but my biggest concern is a lot of the industry is very dependent on Diamond being who they are. And quite frankly, not to blow our own horn, but I think you'd have to look back at what's happened to us or Jeppi Family Enterprises in the last almost 2 years. We've had 4 gut punches. We first had
Yes.
COVID, which everybody has and still has to a certain degree. Then we lost the exclusive on DC, although we still have the UK. Then Marvel gave a exclusive distribution to PRH, which we still are able to buy, and we, quite frankly, retained a good chunk of the business. I was happy about that. So there was 3 gut punches. Then the ransomware comes as 4. It reminds me of the line in Rocky where he says, "It's not how hard you can punch, it's how much you can take a punch and keep moving forward." Well, we've certainly taken our punches, but I got to say, and this is not BS, we are as strong as you can get. We have the number 1 bank in the country, the number 1 law firm in the country, and we have the number 1 accounting firm in the country, and we have the best employees out there. So I've got a great team, and we're having a great year. I mean, despite all of that, we're having a great year, and we think the future's bright for not only
Great.
Diamond,
I mean,
but the industry.
while you're definitely some of the income has gone down, I would assume some of your costs have gone down as well, and that hopefully you can pivot and
Well, the big problem for people today is labor
stay
and freight.
viable.
We got
Yeah.
ships. When I say we, I mean the country, sitting out there, Long Beach. There's a ton of ships. You watch the video, can't get into the dock. There's not enough workers. They don't want to work. It's terrible. Everybody wants to. It went from work from home was because of the virus to work from home became a competitive thing. Somebody else who's desperate for workers, well, if you work for me, I'll let you work from home. And it's very appealing. And I'd love to give my employees everything that I could give them that makes it better for them. But it's a mixed bag. Some jobs are conducive to that. Some jobs aren't.
Sure.
And so we're dealing with that. If you want to add that as a gut punch.
I've been working from home for 10 plus years, Steve, but I can't see how a truck driver works from home. You know what I mean? Like,
we're going to ship your comics from our houses. But at the same token, there are technical jobs, and some jobs that we've always had people work from home. There were jobs that were more conducive. For example, the guy that I told you that isn't on the payroll but is working on the Overstreet app. Yeah. I want him to be separated. I don't want him to be bothered by the chatter. And that's such a technical job. And he's a Kool-Aid drinker. Like I call guys that are on the team, like they're the Kool-Aid guys. They drank the Kool-Aid. They're as in love with it as I am, if that's possible. And so
perfect segue.
That job was
sorry.
meant for that.
Go ahead. Well, perfect segue. If we're going to talk about technology and Kool-Aid, let's talk about NFTs for a second, Steve.
You have to. I'm telling you, I've got a friend now, and he is all over that. As up many people. When new things like this happen, you can tell it's something's new and exciting when everybody's trying to teach you it. It's like when e-commerce came along, there was a million teachers. Because they figured nobody knew anything and they could just show it a little and they would look valuable. So while that, like everything else that comes along that's new and innovative, my prediction is it'll be like everything else. The smart people, the really due diligent business people will make hay with that. Probably a lot of people won't because they'll look for the quick fix, the low-hanging fruit. But that said, I no one was a bigger skeptic than me about why somebody would pay a fortune for a little image on the blockchain technology. But there's more
Yes.
to that than that. My version of an NFT, as I see it, the non-fungible token, and I'm going to beat my guy to the punch probably because I think the press release is about to go out. I may be beating him. I don't know. But nonetheless, there's the component of where you're selling let's call it an invisible product or lack of a tangible product. We said non-fungible, or a fractional ownership in an existing real product. So if I said to you, Dan, I know it's minuscule. I know it's kind of hard to justify, but I'll give you an analogy why you've already done it. But if I said to you, Dan, you could own for $100, I'll make a number up, a fractional share of the Mona Lisa. Dan Shaheen, I'm a part owner of the Mona Lisa. Well, what's the difference when you buy your nephew one share of Disney? Does the Disney company know you exist? They can't own 100% without that share. So, but you get an annual report.
Sure.
You're a shareholder, and it's a bragging right. So suddenly, thousands of people, literally millions of people, buy into something that they love, want to boast about, that is actually transactionable. So when you're a part owner, if you will, shareholder, you can, and the demand is greater than the supply, like everything else. And Dan's done with it. And he wants to sell his that isn't readily available for somebody else because the allotment has been full. It's like everything else, supply demand. We know that if there's 5 things known and no one wants it, not very valuable. But if there's 1 million known and 10 million people want it, look at Hulk 181s. How many have they slabbed? 20,000.
Okay, so this makes sense though for a Mona Lisa maybe, and for a Hulk 181 maybe.
So I am still skeptical about but then again, I love comic books and somebody else loves things that I can't understand. But I'm not going to limit this to comics, artwork, the ability to give you an example. I've been there, I've held it in my grubby little hands, and I intend to talk to Carla about it at the Library of Congress. We know that some years ago, anonymously, someone donated the entire original art to Amazing Fantasy 15. You're a comic collector. Is it worth $100 to you to say you own a part of the original art of Amazing?
I guess it depends how many parts there are. For one thing,
there's a lot of them, but you get some little bennies. You get them through the blockchain technology. Maybe you get to do or see or say something. For example, my buddy owns the best copy of Action 1 in the world. Now, we've all seen the cover front and back a million times. It's been reprinted. But it was something special about if you were able to see page by page that copy in your blockchain. This is all stuff that maybe somebody else is not even saying about NFTs. I'm saying it because it's the way I view it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to
see to me, Steve,
why somebody would want to own something that they can't necessarily even touch.
Sure. Oh, well, to me, Steve, here's where the NFTs make the most sense.
One thing you can't deny is the money. Billions are transactions.
It's going in there. But to me, what makes sense is it's like an artist being able to sell their original art. Now, if you're a purely digital artist, then it only existed in that digital form. So if you could take your copy of your script that you wrote or your image that you created
precisely
and sign and number it essentially, which is all that an NFT really is. It's a signed and numbered copy.
You have a physical lithograph that's signed by Karl Barks, one of 350 or whatever. You know, in that case, it's different because you have a tangible physical, but it's still got Karl Barks' signature on it. There's not 351 of them, you know, and that's once they're sold and the guy that wants yours has to come to the table. It's
when you get into multiple copies like that, and the ownership of the file is almost
there's 2 things. There's
the image is not the thing, right? It's the ownership of the token
version of it, and there's so you could have a Mona Lisa, the actual Mona Lisa, and a digital Mona Lisa, you know, and you could buy either or both, a piece of either or both. It's kind of, you know what it is, Dan? This is all Steve Jeppi, whatever. I may be way out of
yeah.
But Bitcoin, I think, is here to stay. I would have never made that statement a couple of years ago. My son came to me. He had Bitcoin when it was $3,000. It went to $19,000. We gave him all the standard. And then we, see what I told you? It went down again. Then next thing you know, it's 60.
Yeah.
Bitcoin, you got to remember, currency is just a transactional mechanism.
Yes.
If you, back in the farm days, had a bale of hay and I had a case of corn, I want hay, you need corn, we trade, we evaluate it. But if you're in California and I'm in Maryland, I can't, it ain't cost effective to ship the hay. So somebody else in California has the corn or hay, and I give them a token that represents that. In our case, it's U.S. currency, right?
Yes.
Well, the problem with U.S. currency is counterfeiting. And even now the wiring is so. Look what happens with ransomware.
Well, and it's purely based on the Federal Reserve, so it's inherently inflationary. They can print as many as they want of U.S. dollars,
trying to get safer. It's the problem we inherited with technology. While technology is wonderful, it created a possibility for somebody to be across the street from your house or 12,000 miles away and penetrate your world and do something crazy like hacking or ransomware. So currency in and of itself is no real value. A pile of paper.
Brother.
But
I agreed.
Acceptance of that token or that currency, whether it be a Bitcoin or a $100 bill, is what is the medium for getting the product you want or the service you want. Now, PayPal's now accepting Bitcoin.
It's amazing. And in the supply and demand thing, the idea is that the supply of
Bitcoin hand in hand with NFTs. It goes hand in hand with NFTs.
Yeah, it's the supply and demand created on a digital asset,
We've created
essentially.
a virtual world. Look how people go. I remember when it's probably antiquated now, but Disney had, my kid was on when he was little. It was called the Virtual Magic Kingdom. And you go on the site and little people are walking around and it's you. And you can talk to another person in Disney World. And it's like very crude by today's standards. But how cool is that if you live in an imaginary world?
Absolutely.
And people love to interact.
Like I do, Steve. Like I literally am doing right now.
Well, you got your version of the Library of Congress there, I see.
Yeah, that's right. The Fanographics, the Library of Fanographics.
There you go.
Okay, let's move into, that's a perfect segue, back into books and distribution talk. Let's just talk about, you talked about the punches, man. Besides COVID, I think COVID was the first domino, right? Because it was the
may not have ever
ostensibly.
Maybe it was good that it did. If you want to try to find something good, I mean, don't get me wrong. I love being 100% of whatever, the distribution and all. Never viewed myself as a so-called monopoly because I always, in my heart, was, if you want to call me the benevolent dictator who isn't the dictator, he just happens to look like he has that kind of power. But if anybody ever felt leveraged, it was me, because I was always beholding to and look what happened. Whatever I actually believed that other people thought was the opposite happened. But if it expands the market and more I would rather own a smaller piece of a much bigger pie if it makes our market grow. And we have hit a point in time where, because of COVID, wasn't because of COVID, but it kind of accelerated it, where the market's about to it's kind of like you're going through space and you hit that button that goes to warp speed and you suddenly take off. Well, that's a big jolt, right? And sometimes you have to have a big jolt to go to the next level. And that's the way I look at this. No, I wouldn't volunteer for it to happen. But now that it has, I'm a big believer. Why are you crying about the past? A lot of good's coming from this. And quite frankly, maybe this is a segue for my the comeback will be bigger than the setbacks prediction, is that because when panic sets in, there's always opportunity, because the vast majority of people will run away from the fire, not to the fire. And sometimes the good that's really available, that wasn't available prior to this when everybody was happy with their own little world, is near the fire. And you're running in the wrong direction. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to seize opportunities, I may not have bought CGA right now had this not happened. You just never know what would have taken. So I'm very confident that all of this happened for a reason. I don't wake up in the morning with my name on the sunshine and saying the world is Steve Jeppi's, everything has to go for him. I'm happy to have my share, and I've been blessed to have a good share. And I'm excited right now. I'm probably more excited than I was back in the day because I feel renewed.
Okay, I want to just talk about briefly the sort of the chain of events that you set up there. So COVID hit. The decision was made to shut down distribution at Diamond for a variety of factors: shipping, availability, safety of the workers, etc. This was used ostensibly as the reason for DC to break their exclusive contract, although they probably could have at any time.
I'll never know the full reason per se. My guesstimate is if you're owned by a big company like AT&T/Time Warner, and your distributor says, I'm not shipping this week, being objective, somebody probably said, how the hell did we get in a position where all our eggs were in that basket?
Yeah.
A logical thing to say, not a wrong thing to say.
Yes.
May not understand it the way it evolved or whatever, but nonetheless, the right assumption. So there was already a leaning probably anyway prior to COVID to figure out if there's a way to be less dependent on one distributor. And so they made that decision. And I don't hate DC at all for that. I still love DC. I still love the comics. I still respect the people that even made the decision because they had their lieutenants. They had to answer to people too. So that's yesterday. What about today? Now, what has happened since then and what can we do? I think the good news is how we got here is that the market's growing. I mentioned this to you earlier before we went on the air. Diamond has, despite all of the gut punches, has opened substantially more new comic book stores than have closed in the last 2 years. How does that happen if the industry's gone to pot because of some decision? No, I think it's indicative of the fact that the time was needed to be a little more diversified, whether it be distribution, publishing, or anything else. You disappeared, so I assume you're there somewhere.
I'm here, Steve. You can still hear me. I'm having a little bit of a camera problem, so just bear with me if you will.
Well, you know me, I could talk your ear off, so I don't want to.
Oh, well, I want to. What I wanted to talk about. So the decision for DC to make the pullout may have prompted, as you said, Marvel to reassess their situation and make the move to.
Let's go back to that point in time. It was evident to me that, and to anybody with a logical brain, it was not fair to my retailers to ship them comics if they couldn't open up. And it wasn't fair to ship them to some who could and others who couldn't. You know how sensitive everybody is about timeliness of delivery. You know, you get the comics today and I get them next week. I'm dead in the water, right? Customers are going to migrate to the newest. No different than if you were watching a movie and it's the finale with the big secret being revealed and they release it in one side of the country and not the other. And then what happens in that second? The spoiler alert, everybody's going to know before they get the joy experiencing it because everybody else told them what happened. So we knew that was the case. So while it was a big financial hit, we could not, in good conscience, ship comics to stores that couldn't open to sell them. So we made that decision. We had no idea how long it would last. And that's why we announced that we went to the publishers to ask for some help financially. I mean, in hindsight, we could have weathered that storm and paid everybody right on time. But we didn't know that, and we had to be in a position to, in case it ran a long time, get some support. We knew that if you asked any publisher in the history of Diamond, we were always their best pay account. Always on time, like clockwork. And probably that's what went against us. Because we were so clockwork, is when it happened, it set a panic off the people. So the combination of eggs in one basket, having to wait a little bit, I think it was a total of 18 weeks, they all got paid in full and have since got paid in full like clockwork, probably caused some trepidation at the higher levels where people who really don't understand our market couldn't know all that history. So we got through it. We're here now, strong as ever. And to the point, would I be buying CGA if Diamond was in trouble? I don't know why anybody would. Well, I can understand why somebody would think that. They would say, well, man, they lost DC. Well, first of all, we kept like 45% of Marvel's business out of the gate, despite the terrible competitive nature of the trade terms we have compared to what is being offered. But it just goes to show somebody saw some value in us other than just price. I'd like to think.
Sure. But, Steve, I apologize. I lost my camera, so I've got my little stand-in up on the screen.
And you look as cute as ever. You have a great face for radio.
Thank you. So the switch from Marvel, was that a real surprise to you? Did that come as a shock?
It was and it wasn't. When we knew we had a call coming, personally, I had having went through the DC thing, I guess I had a little paranoia. I sensed it was a possibility. and you knew at the outset of the conversation that it was headed in that direction. The good news was that Marvel still allowed us to sell Marvel instead of just cutting us off. So that was a plus. I mean, it is what it is. And I have absolutely, look, when PRH first week shipment came out, it was, I think everybody knows, it was a disaster, but I didn't wish them any harm. That hurts my retailers who have to pay me for the other stuff.
Sure.
Do I want retailers to get boxes of comics all banged up? No different than when I ship them. I don't want that to happen. But it, you know, and I'm sure they fixed it already and will fix it. But if we're sharing this industry and that decision was made, I want the health of my retailers and my publishers to be as good as it can be for my sake, if I have to be selfish.
Okay, I got a couple questions here.
We're a very interdependent ecosystem.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah. Are you planning on becoming a backer? You hinted at this, Steve, on one of our previous live streams. Anything to talk about in that regard?
COVID actually, that's true. That is a plan. It was a plan that would have been in place now were it not for COVID and the work shortage and all the other things. And again, everything has its time. But no, one of the things I hope to do is to be a full service provider. If you're a comic store, you sell new comics, new magazines, you sell toys, you sell statues, you sell all kinds of stuff. And you sell back issues. And I gave a speech 3 years ago, April. It'll be, I think maybe it'll be 4, I don't know, at C2E2, where it sounded counterintuitive for a distributor to say, but I was encouraging retailers who had, particularly the ones who had never had a back issue business, got into the industry when it was all new comics, and had no space in their store for back issues, that they should find a way to get some version of that as part of their income stream, because let's face it, retail is hard. There are cover prices that are fixated. You can't say it's $2 cover price unless it's a back issue. You can't say I'm going to charge $2.50 for it. It's printed on the book. So your margins are always going to be finite. You need some things in retail, whatever kind of retail you're in, that will give you some, let's call it windfall profit margins to help offset the tight margins, as you know from owning a store. So I figured back issues, while we all have a billion of them, it needs to be organized to where a guy walks or a girl walks into your store, gets their latest comics, gets their bags, their boards, their game, their statue, and says, I need Spider-Man 706. You know that's probably something you can get them easily somewhere, but you don't have it today. To give them the ability to, just like a back issue trade paperback, check the app, check the inventory, have it here the next week or tomorrow, whenever it is. That's what I want to be able to have a retailer have, because they can't fit all these back issues in their store. The landlord doesn't care what you're carrying. He's saying
those days are over.
The square foot price. And if the new product that I sell you that eats up all your space, and I love being able to sell you as much as I can, I still want you to have back issues too. And if I can benefit from that too by supplying them, then I'm doing my job.
Okay, so nothing official in the works?
Nothing that I can point to.
Nothing to announce. Nothing you could talk about yet.
Not yet, but know that that's a big factor in my brain as to a supply we want to be able to give.
Yeah, when I think about all of your various enterprises that we outlined, it's just such a natural fit. It's such a natural extension, and it's something that has not really effectively been done yet in the industry. So if anybody's going to do it,
about all my companies, Jeppi Family Enterprises is, to me, one big company. They're all separate, but they're interrelated. It's my version of how can I contribute to the industry at every point that I'm able, a service or a product that they can run their store. Having been a retailer, I understand. I grant you, it's been eons ago I was behind the counter, but I kind of got it early on. You know, you needed a variety.
Can I make a confession to you, Steve?
Sure.
Okay, so when I bought my store, I just thought back issues were dumb. It was the end. I was one of those new model guys. I had a humongous collection that I bought of Silver Age Marvels mostly, and I offloaded them bulk to an online dealer, and I regret that decision. It was a mistake in my business model because that tied me to the ebb and flow of the new comics that were coming out.
At the time, you weren't the only one that thought that.
Not at all.
People didn't want to have to worry, can I get this stuff? It wasn't like you call the factory and say, send me 5 of each of Spider-Man 1 to 20. But that said, you have to understand the way this evolved. I was fortunate enough to get into a comic book store in the early 70s, and even there before me, there were people in the 60s. But we didn't even think about new product. That was the business. Back issues, going to conventions, buying collections, bagging them up, pricing them, price guide. And new comics became oh my God, I got to carry new comics to keep this guy coming in. There's a guy across town that's selling, and if he keeps going there, he won't come here to buy mine. Oh my God, they're 40% off, and you got to pay 2 months in advance, and they're non-returnable, and you got to buy them in increments of 25. Are you out of your mind? People have no idea how bad it was compared to what it is today, where people are getting big discounts, all kinds of services. We were just doing it to keep people coming to buy our back issues.
Yeah.
So
on the other hand, today,
if you're that, you won't understand how intricately involved back issues are to new product. They are the reason the new comic business survived.
I agree 100%. And I would also say they proved out the concept that people wanted these old stories. They weren't just disposable like newspaper comics were viewed to be. They wanted a collection of comics.
If you found last month, or God forbid, 2 months old comic on a newsstand, you felt like you had found God. I remember once, it took years to realize this later, I bought a Superboy number 69, I believe it was, where he learns to fly with the balloons. Beat up copy. I found it in some secondhand store, and I thought I had found Noah's Ark. It was the Ark of the Covenant or whatever. It was. Yeah. It looked to me. So it's 1959. I find it in 1960. I don't know till 20, 30 years later. It was only a year old when I found it. But to me, because I had never seen it, it's like a new product. When you see an old comic you've never seen, it's like a treasure because you don't have availability. So the comic store didn't exist. So, God, if you had a place that had back end, like I did in 1959, it was this little liquor store on the corner of Lombard and Central Avenue where this guy had a son who was selling, I'll be polite, magazines in the back room. Also happened to have comic books. And I got my first job at 9 years old. He paid me with comic books. And to me, it was heaven.
Yes.
I'd go up there and see, and he'd periodically get a new batch, and I was thumbing through these at a nickel a piece. But he was the first guy I knew that I would pay more for old comics. So he had his nickel box, but he had his quarter box. He had his 50 cents off, and I can tell you as a fact, he offered me Superman 1 day. I never actually saw it, but he said he had it for $5. I would have paid it in a heartbeat, but my mother would have thought I was out of my mind.
Amazing.
But
Steve, you're the only guy.
Because the kid who picks up a 2017 comic book, to him, it's probably like it was to me in 1959. It's 3 years old. I don't see it anywhere. My God.
Steve, you're the only guy I know who started working in comics for comics earlier than me. I started at 11 at the comic book store.
I was
That's
9.
Amazing. That's amazing.
And it was only to subsidize my hobby. I walk up that 6 blocks with my $2 on Saturday and get 40 comic books. Archie's, Harvey's, Marvel's, I'm a Superman. Actually, I wasn't a Marvel collector because it was 1960, 59.
How much did he pay you?
Paid me in comics. He paid me like $1 an hour in comics.
$1 an hour. I got $2 an hour in '86.
Yeah, $1 an hour, whatever. It might have not been. I don't remember. All I knew was getting a comic book. He'd say to me, and he was a dear friend, tough businessman, very curt. He turned out to be very philanthropic. He passed away years ago. What do you want, kid? Money or comics? Don't matter to me. I'm a little kid. Oh, I'll take the comic.
Of course. Of course. I would
look like a genius if I kept those comics now.
Okay, we got to. Oh, hey, our old pal John Jackson Miller says absolutely
Hey, John,
agree.
How you doing?
Back issues made the difference in 2020 to 21. I really thought this pandemic thing would be the death blow, and then the distributors leaving, but the fans clung on, and the owners are tenacious.
Did you remember me saying to you in one of those interviews? I believe I did. That a restaurant closes for 2 months and people eat somewhere else. They can't get that business back. But if they miss a month's worth of comics, when the doors open again, they're going to want those comics, and there's still going to be a desire to have them. And then we're going to have the retroactive business that we thought we lost. Now, maybe you wouldn't capture 100% of the impulse buys, but that's kind of what made them even more desirable. Now you were back. Now your new comics were back issues in a sense because you had to wait to get them.
Yeah, and I think the graphic novel industry, far from killing the back market issue, as many retailers thought it might, it just enhanced it. It just provided another way for people to get the stories in an affordable way.
Comic-Con is saying here about hundreds of millions of dollars are done annually in back issues and no one really counts them. Well, I think it's bigger than the comic market. I think there's more money spent on back issues by far than their new product.
I
'Cause have a
think you
good
have to
feel for what
undoubtedly
movies
be
go,
right.
and I can get you
In dollars, yes. No doubt
no
about
doubt
it.
in my mind. It's over $1 billion a year in back issues. Just look at
That
some
might
of
just be your collection, Steve.
the. Look, Heritage has done 26 and 23 and $17 million auction in a weekend.
So are you still reading and or
This is
collecting
my boy
comics?
Jesse, and there's a guy that's selling a lot of back issue.
That's
God
my
bless
man,
you,
Jesse James.
I don't.
Yeah.
Jesse. By the way, I haven't forgot you. I am going to call you. Jesse sells over 1,800 a day. Do the
Yeah.
math.
He started at 12.
Coincidental. I don't know if he's ever extrapolated this. I only know this because there's a casino in Baltimore that had a nightclub called 1440, and the reason it's called 1440 is there's 1,440 minutes in a day.
Oh,
So
okay.
he's selling a comic a minute,
Love it.
24/7. Good job,
Love it,
Jesse. I
Jesse.
want to know when it's $10 comics a minute.
They got an amazing thing going on over there at the Comic Book
He
Shopping
does,
Network.
there's
Go
a
check
case
them
of a
out.
guy that just took a business model that used to exist in some ways, you call it the infomercial or whatever, and has done very well with it. I'm proud of him.
I've been working with
Happened to a
Jesse.
nicer guy.
I've been working with Jesse, and I hope to work with him more in the future. Jesse, you owe me a call, remember?
Jesse can tell you that if Jesse's doing that, and there's thousands of comic stores, how many comics are being sold today?
A lot.
Do the math. If every comic store, say there's 3,000 stores, sell one comic a day. We know that's a ridiculous number, right?
Right.
That's 3,000 back issues a day times
Yeah.
365. Do the math. Then assign any minimum value. You're going to get into some serious numbers before you know what it is. Just take the annual sales of any store and multiply it by 3,000 stores. And that's the stores. What about the dealers that don't have stores, that go to conventions, that sell online? The My Comic Shops of the world.
Impossible to track. Yeah, impossible to track, really, the size. And I think it's underestimated, and it's also underappreciated that like before this stuff was big name, before these were in the movies and everybody knew who, Loki, or not Loki, but Captain America and Iron Man were. Guys like you, guys like me, the people in the industry, guys and gals, we knew, like, there was this stuff resonated with a core group of people for so long, so early. It was, to me, it was like a signal of what would happen once people could open their mind and get past the prejudices that were put in
How cool
place
is it that
against
the very
comics.
product you're selling new and let go out the door at cover price, one day you'll probably pay more for to sell it again? It's a cycle. And that's what back issues were. And I always thought in the 70s, well, they'll never be like they were because people are saving them now. But I go back to the analogy of if there's 5 known and nobody wants it, it won't sell. If there's 1 million known and 10 million people want it, how many Hulk 181 sell every week? Amazing Fantasy 15s?
No doubt about it.
Unbelievable.
Now, what about, let's pivot back to Steve the Man. Pop culturally, what is your thing right now? Like, or do you have a favorite TV show, movie, what's your thing?
My cultural interest?
Yeah, your pop cultural interest, like now.
I'll humbly submit it. It's never changed. It's always been comic books. I mean, I love baseball. I love my Orioles, despite they're lousy. I love, movies. I love a lot of things. But the dominant part of my life is the energy I get from getting, it's all about the thrill of the hunt. My dear friend, Harry Metesky, who used to have his way of saying things, was we referred to the collectibles as the goods, Goods, the goods. And he'd say, Jeppi, all the goods you have are dead. The only goods that are alive are the ones you don't have yet. It was a great way of establishing the thrill of the hunt. Because when you're going after the next one, you've already kind of forgot the last one. You had that thrill. So every day when I bid on auctions and the mail comes with the packages and the opening of the box, the unboxing, if you will.
That's the thing for you.
That's what trips my trigger. Yeah. And the condition of seeing something that I've seen 1,000 times. If I love a Mint Spider-Man 1, why wouldn't I love 20 Mint Spider-Man 1? They're just, it's a rush. I don't know how to, I tell people this. Addiction. You can be a drug addict, an alcoholic, a gambler, whatever. Every one of those you can get cured. Collecting is incurable. There's no cure because you'll think you're cured and you'll find yourself saving something, keeping something, buying something else. It's incurable. And that's a good thing.
You're right. My collection got stolen when I was in college, when I went to college, and I thought that, and then I became a dealer and I decided you don't get high on your own supply kind of scenario. So I stopped collecting. And then once I left the comics industry, once I sold
Big
that
void.
business, and it was a huge void. And it wasn't just the comics, because I could go out and buy comics.
You
It
can
was
argue
the
that I've been doing
people,
this
it
my
was the
whole life.
culture. Yeah.
I was 9 years old. I got a job sorting getting paid in comics. And it was when I was 13 that I had to quit school to support my mother, so I got out of it. Not because I didn't like them anymore. It was my life changed. And I always use this story. I was in Harbor Place when Harbor Place opened in 1980. I remember the night before all the merchants were getting ready, and it was excitement. And I'm sitting there with my little kiosk thinking, is anybody going to buy comics? Impulse. I knew collectors would come, but I mean, just walking by, would they not have intended to buy a comic, and would they buy them? And I was, day one, I was like, I'd been there 20 years, but very many times it happened. A gentleman, maybe in his 50s, would show up, and I'd watch his face, and he's looking at the board, seeing all these comics, and I'd go up to him and say, you remember all those, don't you? And he'd go, yeah, I kind of do. I said, let me ask you a question. He said, what's that? I says, when did you stop enjoying them? And every time I get this blank look, and I'd say, you didn't, did you? Your mother told you you're getting too old. You got a girlfriend. You started something else. But it's okay. It's okay to be 50-some years old and like comics. And you would see this look of satisfaction on their face. I got the biggest charge out of that because I was letting them know it was okay. And he didn't even remember why he stopped.
And that's culture. That's common currency now, right? That's everybody.
Yeah, now everybody, it's like nobody says, hey, did you hear a comic is worth money? It's quite frankly, it's the reverse. Now somebody comes with a collection, they think they're worth 10 times the current crazy prices.
True, absolutely right. Yeah, they've overvalued them.
Nature. Hey, I heard a Mario game sold for $2 million. Mine must be worth $6 million.
But it's that literary and cultural respectability that they've attained. It's comics in general.
It's acceptance. Yeah. This is like Bitcoin. When people accept it, then it'll be different. But until it's accepted, it takes a while for the rest of the team, the rest of the world to come on board. And we were blessed to be early on adapters. And why? Not because of money. We did it because we love the comics.
Yeah, that's it.
Man,
that's
I could take a beat-up old Archie comic and think I just found God in 1959. Every Saturday, my $2 got me 40 comics. I'd lay on the couch. My mother would make me a couple of hamburgers, and I had a soda, and the fan was blowing on me because we had no air conditioning. That was a utopian situation for me.
But Steve, you mean you didn't purchase your empire from your vast trust fund and use that to bankroll
my vast trust fund?
I thought for sure, right?
Trust fund was the chicken came after the egg. After I opened the store, quit my good-paying job at the post office with a family of 2 kids and a wife and government benefits. After I made that sound, responsible decision, about 6 months later, I got my post office retirement money out. I didn't want to leave it in there. And I came to the outrageous amount of $1,500. That day, my old deceased friend, Mark Feldman, must have had sniffed me, called me with a Disney collection, and guess what the price was? $1,500. he knew. He knew. And it was gone in a day to buy that collection.
Man. I love to hear a story like you, somebody who could come from those kind of humble beginnings and through love, through your passion, got you where you are today. And that passion doesn't seem to have slowed down.
No matter what I would get in the way of money, somebody was always waiting at the end of the trail for almost that exact price. If I made a score and I made $5,000, I couldn't spend it fast enough on the next load. It was a snowball.
Steve, I've got a $5 million NFT to sell you. We could talk about after the show then, maybe.
Well, NFTs are coming.
Well, Steve, I want to thank, I like I was telling you before, I was an early Bitcoin adopter at 90 bucks I bought. And I said, I would spend $1,000 to play like a poker tournament that could get me to the World Series of Poker or something like that. I'm a gambler. So I said, I'll buy 10. And I bought 10 and I told my friends and I said, buy them. And I watched as it went up and up. Nobody believed it. And even they kind of talked me out of believing in it, to tell you the truth. And I never bought any more. As it went up, I couldn't even believe it.
You want to get naysayers, talk to somebody in finance about them. Talk to a bank.
Yes.
That's bullshit. They will never.
And that's all starting to change, though. That's all changing.
I tell you about NFTs, and you can't deny the numbers. NFTs, my friend who's working on this, off the clock, so to speak, he sends me like three, four articles a day on some latest sale of an NFT for millions of dollars. Billions of dollars are transacting every week, way more than the comic industry. And yet we're in the perfect position to be a part of that world too.
To tell you the truth, Steve, I think the angle for NFTs, if I were to say one thing, the one that makes the most sense for me is the original, one of a kind, truly non-fungible.
That's kind of where my mind is. That's
Yeah.
where I'm not knocking the others, but I told you, I alluded to something earlier I have going on that I guess I can do this.
Yeah.
I have a friend, I hope he doesn't mind me saying his name. His name's Adam. I'll just say Adam, okay? And he owns a company that's involved in NFTs. And we have become very close associates. And the ideas go back and forth with us each day. Will make your head spin. So I'm a kind of like, I'm not from Missouri, but I'm a show me kind of guy, you know? And I said, well, one way to find out if this is real is to do it yourself. So if it hasn't already went out, I know I signed off on it, but I don't know. But we held off on the announcement because of the ransomware. You know, we didn't want to be in the middle of that. And either it's went out or I'm scooping myself. But I own the original art to the Snow White poster from 1937 by Gustav Tengren. You could buy a Snow White poster, style A, that might cost you $10,000 to $20,000 to $30,000 depending on condition. But more than one people can own that. We're going to do a partial offering up to 25% ownership, which you won't take possession physically because obviously I have it, but you will be able to say and transact and sell your share of that item. I don't want to give you the prices and the details now, but we'll find out. Because
I think it's interesting. Fractional NFT.
That's something that no one can have. And quite frankly, you could argue no one can see because the poster's in color. And quite frankly, another unique piece of it, when they did the poster, they flipped it. So everything's a mirror image. So if you're looking at the original art and put the poster next to it, it's a flip, which was commonly done. But it is when I tell people who run the comics, I get them up close to this in my house. And I say, I know you don't know anything about comic art, but go look at her eyelashes, Snow White's. It was done with pen and ink. And if that isn't fine art, I don't know what is. You have to see this Gustav Tengren. It's beautiful. And that's something that I feel like to say you own a piece of that, you're think about it. If Dan Shaheen buys 1,000 shares of Microsoft, does Bill Gates know you exist?
No.
Do you have any say whatsoever?
No.
Well, you got a little certificate that says that, right? And in the case of the stock market, it's transactable because the fluctuation of the value on shares.
I think with something like that, there would be Disney fans that would be interested in that for sure. Absolutely. And you could control a controlling interest of shares,
you offer them some kind of penny that maybe that no one else can do or see through blockchain technology.
To tell you the truth, so where I go,
if I want a piece, I'd buy a piece.
I get where I go though. I never even thought of that angle before, because to take a physical object, digitize it, and then fractionalize it is pretty interesting. But like if you took someone like Brian Bolland, the great artist, the great comic artist, right? He's purely digital now. He doesn't use ink or paper at all. So if you were to take one of his original cover images and NFTize it, then that's a one-of-a-kind original piece of Brian Bolland artwork.
I'm becoming a convert. I mean, not because I think I can benefit from it. I'm really getting interested. And you go back to, what do you really own? I mean, there's so many other things that precede this. It just sounds weird, but it's the same thing you've been doing. You own a share of Disney that you buy for your nephew, so you can say, here's a nice birthday present or whatever. He owns one share of Disney. It's a bragging right. Technically, Disney cannot own 100% of that company without your share, and you get an annual report. But you're a Disney shareholder, and it doesn't cost a lot of money. Now, here's an example. If I'm buying a company that has, let's say, $1 million bottom line profitability, EBITDA, and they want 5 times EBITDA, I pay $5 million for that. Well, would I pay $100 million for that? No way, right? I can't live long enough. But that happens every day in the stock market. It's so broken up into pieces There's no one person paying the equivalent of what that adds up to.
Yeah, to me it's a little more difficult. Like the collectible value and the feeling that you own it is something, but it's like with the stock market, I could have a dividend earning stock, etc. That
Yeah,
can
right.
literally,
It's not apples to apples, but what I'm saying is that the ability to sell an item for way more than would it be if you bought the whole item makes it by piecemeal more attractive for a piece at a high price proportionately. Because if you buy it all, you want a deal. You say, I'm buying it all. You get buy a share for $100. Why do I got to pay $100 a share for all the shares? Ironically,
but if someone could on the aftermarket track down and buy all the shares or something and say, I am the complete owner now of the NFT rights.
And remember, you don't have to own the whole thing to be controlled. You have to declare what, 5%, 10%. So you got, if you're a corporate raider like a Carl Icahn and you go buy enough to be a pain in the ass, they have to get rid of you. You know, you've got enough to do what you want, and maybe you'll pay a premium for that piece. Oh my God!
Speaking of corporate
I remember
icons,
that
cover. That's Jesse James. He just sent this to me.
I love it.
There's a lot of great Steve Jeppi.
The girl in red, Kathy. I can't remember her last name right now. It'll come to me. I got a great picture of her sitting next to Stan Lee signing autographs with him. Stan was in his glory. She was hot.
Well, Steve, I want to thank you, man, for the time. You've been really generous with your time. I want to finish this off. I want to ask you. I had in my notes. Let me see one more thing. Yeah, give me the future of Diamond. Give me the next year of Diamond. Are there going to be any changes in Diamond, the way Diamond structures their discount, shipping, etc.? Any way we're going to get to, you always got to get a shipping question, Steve. So when will we get to 50% off and free shipping, if ever?
It's a complicated answer, not dodging it, but what I will say is this. And what I said at the beginning, I was letting the chips fall. We didn't know when Marvel announced 7 months later how much of their business we would retain. It's really almost a mathematical formula to be able to determine how much business we have, what we can afford to do, and how it affects each person individually. I will say this, and I'll never say anything negative about a competitor ever, and this is not a negative comment, it's an observation. PRH's platform is a freight-free company. Now, personally, I don't know what their deal is with the shippers, but I know what it probably could be. It's a very bad time to be a freight-free company when you know what's happening with freight.
Ah, yes.
What is going up at a rapid pace? Gasoline prices. You got the docks that can't get people to work. Shipping is almost unpredictable.
Cardboard prices, everything.
So if you make a statement that you're a freight-free company, I hope you don't add in perpetuity. Because to say
that might change, huh? You think that could change?
Keep doing it because at some point the calculator is going to say, hey, buddy, you're losing money. I don't predict that that's going to happen. I'm just saying for us, and you want me around, it's going to be hard for me to compete with freight free in the absolute sense.
All I know is that if you could, you would, and kept the quality of shipping that Diamond, and that's a hard thing to say you could do. But if you could do that, there's no doubt in my mind that people would choose Diamond over PRH's
thank you for
current
that
shipping
comment, because I do believe, despite the criticism, you got to remember, when you're the main guy, and in some cases the only guy for a while, you get all the praise and you get all the criticism. You can't be at the top of the. That's why I'd never be a politician. Half the world would hate me overnight. It's just the way it works. So we like to think we do a good job. We're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But now the good that comes out of there is a comparative point. Maybe people, I hope, will realize just how good a job we did do.
Yes.
Maybe some will say, no, you're not as good as the new guy, and that's why we're there. Whatever it is, that will motivate us. Then if we are doing a worse job and it's demonstrable and we believe it, it's going to make us do better. Not because we didn't want to begin with. It just, now it's available elsewhere. It's like anything else.
Because I have no doubt.
Bookstores go out of business because people want to shop at home and get a discount.
Yeah, PRH has been a nightmare, not just in shipping, but on reorders, their systems, their Fox systems. People have a tendency
to one-dimensionalize what it is to get a comic book into your store.
Yes.
Is it only the discount? It's just the most obvious. But I'm telling you, and I know there's cases where PRH is substantially cheaper for certain accounts than it is others, but there is a balance here. We let people count all their volume towards the products that aren't brokeraged, or the discounts aren't set by the publisher. We still allow them to count that towards their volume that lets them achieve another discount level on other products.
Yes,
so
yes.
Maybe you might
yes.
get your XYZ Comics freight free here, but because your volume, and we haven't done that yet. We may do that.
Steve, that's what you need to do. There's no doubt that's what's going to solve it.
We started to do it and we postponed it. Because
you got to do it. That will win you Marvel business. Yeah.
There's some people think there's two things, right and wrong. Seems pretty obvious, right? But right is only right when it's done at the right time.
Yeah.
You could do the right thing at the wrong time and it could be a disaster.
Yes. Agreed.
Agreed.
But see, the problem the shops that I talk to now is they want to stay with, a lot of them want to stay with you. But it was the loss of discount, then the loss of shipping, then now their diamond shipments are small and the shipping price is humongous on a tiny box of comics. Whereas if they were able to combine, absolutely they would move in your direction.
One of the mistakes that a lot of people make is they don't value their own time. Oh, I do it myself.
Yes.
And they say, that don't cost me anything. Well, are other costs, look at people that got to break 3 shipments down a week now in some cases.
Yes.
You think that doesn't have a value or a cost to it?
3 different order forms, 3 different FOC forms per week with different systems.
That if I'm a retailer, and I wasn't, back when I was doing it, wasn't anywhere near as complicated as it is now with a big thick previews and all that. But now, what are you going to do if you leave Diamond, publisher, and you have to go into another system? They bitched about being lost in previews. The biggest guys got Marvel and DC, they were lost in previews. I mean, they got like 40 pages. But understandably, it's not only them. And everybody wants to be on the headlines. So what do you think other publishers feel like? So with Marvel and DC coming out of the catalog before even this happened.
True.
Other publishers got to bump up in profile. But at the end of the day, the retailer's the one sitting there going through 500 pages. And my job is to make your job as easy, but not easy for the sake of easy. It's got to be effective and efficient. It can't be that you lose something for the ease of doing it. You want to have your customers, the FOC has become almost, instead of monthly orders, it's now probably turning into weekly orders at some point.
It is, Steve. And that's the other suggestion I have to make is that to really, I mean, you guys already have, but like really pivot towards what Jim Hanley used to call weekly previews. That's what the FOC has
Everybody
become.
likes to have a leeway. Whenever you give somebody, if you're telling your wife to be ready at 7, you tell her 6. It's so effectively the printer is a big factor in here. They have to schedule print time. It isn't like, okay, we'll wait till you're ready and then ship. We got something like that. Presses are got to be running. So when the publisher knows he's got a deadline that he absolutely has to meet from the printer, you go back to the artist and the writer, but at some point it becomes the printer running the show. And that FOC date, there's a physical side of this that takes a while, even with computers, to tabulate. So they've cut that as close to the bone as they can, to the point where it was ironic that we were told, I don't want to tell tales out of school here, but when the DC thing happened and they cut us off entirely, one of the things was said, well, you guys didn't give us an extension because, and that wasn't really 100% true. I don't want to get into the detail of that. I was questioning why they needed another one, and I was often willing to do it. But one was, well, we have a deadline for FOC, and if we don't know by today, we have to make a decision. And guess what happened? They extended it a week after they made the decision.
Yeah.
So, if it was absolute, it wasn't. And I'm not blaming that on DC. I'm just saying that there's a line in the sand somewhere for everybody. And the train backs up. And sure, every retailer would love to know exactly who's going to show up in their store that day and how many going to buy so they can order accordingly, just in time and inventory. But the trade-off you got to remember for the quintessential word of returnable was you were getting a much bigger discount than a newsstand was for the privilege of ordering what you want and not having to get an auto shipment. We had stores in the 70s that would get 100 Love Romance and 5 Spider-Man. And it was just computer generated. They didn't know. Now the comic store's pitch was I know what I'm doing, but it's nice to have but they still kind of want returnable, and that's hard to give if you want those discounts. It doesn't work
I
mathematically.
I think the returnability ship has sailed. I think some people think it's great, but even in the book industry, it's not 100% returnability.
No,
It's
but
small amounts.
the magazine, you got to remember this, and maybe I'm telling tales out of school. When I saw the PRH offering, it said something that I don't know if anybody noticed. Is it order from PRH or PRHPS? Do you know what that is?
Mm-mm.
Penguin Random House Periodical Services. Now, I may be telling tale out of school, but what I think that meant, and I'll say it up publicly, they were going into the periodical business. They didn't do that for Marvel alone. So maybe they're eyeing the newsstand. Maybe they see, we've grown. We're buying Simon & Schuster. If that goes through, we got to have something else to tell the stockholders, So maybe their intention, you go build 1 million square foot warehouse for Marvel alone? I don't think so.
Yeah, doesn't make sense.
You could argue, yeah, but they're coming after Diamond's business. Yeah, but even all of Diamond's business, I don't know that you do that. So my point is, maybe what they were saying was, we finally crossed the bridge that we can do periodicals. For years, they resisted it.
Mm-hmm.
Because in returnable world, like they're in for the most part, and keep in mind, they do sell non-returnable Marvels, not returnable. So they probably said, okay, we'll do it if it's non-returnable. We can justify that. But then all of a sudden, you build 1 million square foot warehouse for one company, even if you anticipated getting all the companies. To me, that said, and nobody really paid attention to that. Why did you have to form another new entity called Penguin Random House Periodical Services?
Makes sense if they're going to building that competency in periodicals.
The world at large know, now that we're doing Marvel Comics, why wouldn't they? They could do any periodical. Strong argument, right? Once you break that barrier,
for sure.
Why wouldn't you do them? I mean, maybe the publisher doesn't want to do them.
It would actually not make any sense not to pursue others. You want to scale up that. I think
that was a subtlety that was right, hidden in broad daylight. Right there on the order of my mind, the way it works, saw it. No one's brought that up but me.
Yeah. I think there's a chance that
and it may have an entirely different reason. It could be that they already had accounts that they wanted to separate new. I don't know. I'm just saying, to form an entity called Penguin Random House Periodical Service clearly differentiates it from the other.
With the shrinking magazine and periodicals business, unless there's maybe going to be a shift, like magazines might become more like collectible objects.
The magazine business has been dying. There used to be 400 what they call ID wholesalers, and they were there was exclusives to the big guys, the Curtis Circulation and all those. They would get the exclusive, and then the 400 guys would have to buy from them. And that was back in the mafioso days. And you know the history of that, don't you? The risk of
the good old days.
Time. You know how the newsstand business got started?
No.
Prior to prohibition being lifted, all those trucks that ran around the country were selling booze. Well, when booze became legal, their trucks were like, what are we going to do with these? They went into the magazine business. And that's why you always had that territorialized Maryland news, don't sell into Pennsylvania news, it's territory. And then for years, they had that monopoly. And then eventually the younger generation took over. They still wanted to emulate their fathers, but they weren't quite the same guys, and it got a little less mafioso, for lack of a better word. And then next we go from 400 to 3.
Wow.
And now when you go to the newsstand, what do you see? Hudson News. They're in retail, every airport. It's like, but it's no different than any other business. Consolidation. Yes. You and I, Dan, are the cause. We're consumers. We want the best, and we want it at the cheapest and the fastest. And the only way you can give the best at the cheapest and the fastest is huge volume.
Yes.
And that's why you have Amazon and Walmart. We created them. We are whores, for lack of a better word. We're going to go and get the best at the cheapest to our door, freight free.
Human nature. Yeah, Well, Steve, I think, though, it's going to get proven. I think this next year is going to prove a lot of things about where loyalties are, about where retailers, where their priorities are. Are they convenience and speed or
here? You put it up on the screen, and I would be remiss if I didn't plug our prediction. But I think everybody would agree that our comeback, and I mean the industry, our comeback has definitely been bigger than our setback. I don't know that it would have evolved this big had it not been for the pandemic, if you want to try to make lemon out of lemonade.
I agree. I was skeptical.
Certainly the back issue market, you could make a strong argument with people at home at the auctions every day. There was always a higher potential of more people being at the switch when the auction went off. you could argue that the big money that's coming to our industry now. Look, what's it? Is it BlackRock, Black Castle? I can't remember. Blackstone, something like that. That put $500 million into
BlackRock Capital, right?
Yeah, BlackRock. They put $500 million deal into CCG, which is the owner of CGC. These acronyms are killing me.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was about several months ago. They big announcement. They bought a controlling interest in CCG. That's the override. Like CGA is my overriding name.
Yeah,
CCG owns CGC, the coin business, all those grading companies. So when a company like that's a multi-billion-dollar investment firm, puts that kind of money in an industry, that's a big vote of confidence that the comeback has been bigger than the setback. Because it didn't have to be new product, and it is new product, but it's more than new product. You own a comic store, and tomorrow morning you do a $10,000 day. You almost don't care whether it was back issues or new comic. Well, you do, because back issues probably more profitable. But I'm saying profit. It's still your volume. Your volume at the end of the year is defined by one number, total sales.
Right.
And how it gets there is a variety of different things. And that's why I made that speech. Retailers need some back issues in their world so that they can survive. And
I think you're 100%
that's the way the business started.
Only way to control your margins, only way to take any kind of possession over your margins is to sell.
And you could say,
used goods.
I can charge you this. You know, that's why we kept the UK. The UK is a little different because as the exchange rate fluctuates, they have to. You go to a UK store, you see a US price on it, but that's not the price. That's extrapolated based on the currency exchange.
Yeah.
You don't have that luxury, if you will. Here, it's finite. You can't charge. You could if you think you could get away with it, but you can't charge $4 for $3 comic unless it's a back issue. But if it's brand new and it's available everywhere for $4, who's going to pay you $5? You know.
What I like about what I actually like about the raise in comic book prices, cover prices a little bit, is like now that an average comic is like $4, why should any back issue in your store be less than $4?
Well, that's a big argument we get from the price guy to why do these things list for less than cover price? It's a topic that's worthy of discussion. You disappeared again.
I know.
But I guess that was the price point guys dissed you in the middle of that comment.
No doubt about it.
Poof, there goes Dan Shaheen.
Yeah, I might need a new camera.
I was the guy back when I was just an advisor of the Price Guide that wrote the section for Bob, comics with little or any value. Back when comics were 75 cents cover price, and a month old they were $1.50. The reason they were $1.50 wasn't because it was, quote, worth twice cover price. It was because you were selling a service. It was the price it cost me to bag it, board it, and make it available to you later so that you
and store it.
I might save you $5 driving from 7-Eleven to 7-Eleven trying to find that issue.
For sure.
So there's a price that's a basic price of availability price, I call it. Read that paragraph. I don't know if it's been modified in recent years in the Price Guide. Comics with a little value. I can almost tell you I wrote it. And it was designed to say, when you go home and you have 1,000 comics and you say the minimum price, don't necessarily mean you got a $1,500 comic collection. So when you come to sell it to me, but you charge $1.50, why can't I get 75 cents for it? Because it's not accounting for all the labor and the bag and the board and the lights and the heat
and the rent on the space of the store.
There are comics that are made available to you for a certain price, or I can't afford to carry them.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing. I thought a couple years ago I thought about opening a new comic book store, and then the last year has just made it go, oh man, I don't know all the skill. Like it used to be open a diamond account.
I would not have run the register.
Well, I just think it's become a lot more complicated, but there are a lot of avenues to make things happen. It's one of the last few small businesses where somebody can make it their own. They can bring their own mix of products in and decide how to make that happen and can be as successful as you want to be.
At the end of the day, you own a store, you're a, quote, retailer. You're a place that exists in a convenient way for people in the nearby vicinity to go to get things you want, whether it be food, drink, comic books. You're a retailer. and you have to compete with whoever else might be selling that same product. So you're trying to make your place more than just about the price it costs. The clubhouse experience is the biggest selling point you have.
Yeah.
When I opened my first store, every comic collector that found my store thought they were the only collector in the world.
Uh-huh.
And when they got to come there, they came to see me. I was their contact, and that was good. I was informative. But what really turned them on was talking to other collectors, because at home, in some cases, they were looked at as the guy with three heads who collects comics.
Yeah.
Now they could come here and discuss comic books and who do you think would win with the Hulk and Superman, and that's why conventions exist. It's the clubhouse. You're going to buy a product, but you're going more for the experience.
That was the amazing part as a kid, was finding a place like the comic book store. It didn't even occur to me such a thing could exist. And then to find it and to see grown men talking about these things that I loved and really being as passionate about it as ever as adults was an inspiration to me.
And men also go to salons to get their hair done or makeup done. But they also go for the social aspect.
Yeah,
just
for sure.
This one away. I wanted to read that and I get a chance to.
Oh yeah, I'll bring it. This is from Jesse James. He's just said he's celebrating 10 years as an Overstreet advisor.
Guys like Jesse are invaluable because they give you real data. And we're going to be a little tighter on that in years come, because a lot of people are on there that don't do a lot. Now we're going to give them their opportunity, but we need people to give full input, because we need everybody's input. And we don't ask a lot. It's, and once it becomes more online, we'll eliminate some of that need, because we'll have it coming from the consumers and the other people besides dealers. But there are people like Jesse that do the work, and we need it, because we want to give you as accurate information as we can. We want you, a guide by definition is quote unquote a guide. It's giving you the ballpark of where you should be. If you're only going to do this once, you find a collection in your father's attic or whatever, you at least want to know you didn't get robbed. You might not get top dollar, but you didn't get robbed. But the person who lives in the industry needs the more day-to-day live stream information, because it evolves so quickly.
Hey, we're back. Great.
Well, both of you are back.
We're me and my buddy.
You're covered by your buddy there. Is that your new mask for COVID?
Well, that's provided by my pal Peter Bagg.
There you go.
Well,
I enjoyed this, Dan. I appreciate the opportunity. I love talking to you personally,
Steve.
And I get a kick out of, later on, whoever probably get more people see this tape than they will live. But as soon as you have it, send it to me so I can send it out on my social media.
It'll be immediately. You can send that link immediately. You can send it right now if you want. People will be able to watch it
so I can just do the easy work and just copy paste and.
You got it.
I'm very technologically challenged in my old age. But I do
Thank
like
you, Steve.
talking to you, and I hope that people find it informative. And any comments, believe me, I love the feedback. So if there's a place for people to comment and they want to ask more questions, I'll try to get to it, or through you.
You heard it, guys. Put those comments down below. If you're watching this after the fact, we've got the live stream. We've been getting to the live stream comments. Steve, I want to thank you. I know you're a busy guy. You got like 12 or 13. Who knows how many companies you got to run. You got NFTs, BTCs.
Not to mention 6 kids and 9 grandkids and 1 great.
Oh my gosh, 6 kids,
9 grandchildren and 1 great.
Awesome, man! Congratulations, thank you, Steve. I know you're busy, so I'm going to pull you off. I got to play the closing credits and make some money. If you got to leave, I understand.
My thanks to everybody who listened and who will listen. I'm an open book. I love talking comics and collectibles and pop culture. I'm not right about everything. And there's many of things I'm not right about or not informed about, but I'm a learner. I want to know, so I value your input, even if it's directly opposed to what I've said.
Oh man, thank you, Steve. I hope we can bring you back again sometime to talk about.
Stay well. I'm always available for you, Dan.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve. Oh, and thank you, world, for checking out this latest one-on-one Steve Jeppi interview. This is for the first time I really got to talk to the guy and ask the questions that were on my mind that I've been wanting to talk about. I appreciate everybody who's watching. If you haven't already, please consider hitting that subscribe button. If you like this, hit that thumbs up thing, man. Please do. It really helps. You can hit the thumbs down if you didn't like it, but then, leave a comment. Tell me what you didn't like. Either way, thank you for checking us out. Next week, We're going to have who? Oh, man, Bill Morrison from Bongo Comics and Mad Magazine and a lot of other stuff. Just contacted him today, so we should have him Thursday at 11. And what else? Hey, we've got some comic queued up in the $1 Million mailbox. I got some stuff from previous guest Don Chin and Schlepzig. We want to take a look at their books soon. I'll be doing that soon. If you've got comics you want to send in, please send them here to the $1 Million mailbox, P.O. Box 1163, Arcata, California, 95518. And man, if you want to, I want to do a stream about the strength of the comics industry, because if you watch just YouTube, and I've had people write to me that are like YouTube people who don't really watch comics, and they go, the comics industry is dying, right? That's what all the YouTubers are saying. They talk about how it's all dominated by whatever, and sales are in the tank, and everything's going away, and they are the one true way. Well, that's a bunch of garbage, I'm here to tell you, and I can prove it. You want to tell me the comics industry is not stronger than ever? Change my mind. Come on, send me a message. I'll bring you on the show. You can debate it with me one-on-one. But man, I've got data and I've got anecdotal evidence that tells me it's doing better than ever. So please come back. Check out my interview with Bill Morrison and the $1 Million mailbox in the not too distant future. When exactly will that be? Well, pretty soon. Oh, don't forget, watch these closing credits. It's how we make our money here. And at the end, don't forget to stick around for a little comic book cameo. This is one that I made myself. So stick around, and we will see you next time.